Hello, everyone joining us. Apologies for the late start for this webinar. We'll just give it a couple more minutes to allow people to join, maybe one more minute, and then we'll get going soon. We just had some slight technical issues involving Zoom, but we're now all sorted. So apologies for the late start. In fact, let's kick us straight off because I can see the numbers looking very healthy. So hello everyone, welcome to this accuBook update. It's officially the March update. We squeaked it in just before the end of March 2021, which is really good. We're still on the monthly schedule for these accuBook updates. My name is Matt Honeyman. I'm joined by a great cast of people here from accuRex, who are all going to be talking to you today about accuBook, our appointments management solution, which is being used on the COVID-19 vaccination program across England, and accuTrack, the point of care solution that will shortly be available to you on the very same program. So we're going to run through an update from Lucy Marples, our clinical lead at accuBook, who'll introduce herself when she comes on screen after I've given some quick overall updates. And then we'll also hear from Maya Chaldecott and Donnie Belfon, who are the product managers on accuTrack. Yeah, so without further ado, we're going to get started with the kind of like the parish updates on the accuRex solutions, accuBook and accuTrack, and the vaccine program. So the first update is we're now at 9 million patients booked by yourselves across the country using accuBook on the appointments management side. It's a huge milestone. You've been smashing milestones all the way through this vaccine program, well ahead of schedule. Really pleased to play a small part in that, but really this is celebrating your achievements. I know that it has been an incredibly busy period over the last few months, so we just wanted to say well done. We can see it all in the numbers, and thank you very much for all of the feedback that's helped us develop accuBook and accuTrack and to help support you on your journey on this program. So well done there. Next is about some overall updates to the program. So the first bit is about new vaccines. So Moderna, we received a notification last week. It's going to be added to the program, and the notification from NHS Digital about how to build it into point of care solutions and to the appointment management side. On the accuBook side, for appointments, they'll be in the product by the start of next week. So if any of you across primary care or hospital hub sites or anyone else using accuBook is going to be receiving Moderna deliveries and you want to put patients into them, that's something you'll be able to start inviting them from the start of next week. So that's really good news there. And then on the accuTrack side of things, on the point of care solutions, when people start going live with that, Moderna will be built in. So that's all sorted there for you. And in general, future changes to the program like that, like new vaccines and things like that, will be available for you. Sorry, I should have said at the very beginning that feel free to start asking questions in the Q&A. At the end of those presentations that I talked about before, we'll also have a chance to do a Q&A session like we normally do in these accuBook updates, about half an hour as well. So you can get any questions that you have about that covered there. You can see a couple of questions coming in already. I'll make sure that we get those answered for you. And then in the long term, whatever changes to the vaccine program, we're anticipating being able to keep up and start making them making the various things available to you, whether it's new vaccines or other changes to the dosing guidance. Lucy's got updates for you on that too later on as well, but anything you'll be covered in the long term. And that includes boosters and things later on in there. Yeah. So one thing that we also wanted to talk about, which we understand is a bit of a problem and a pain point for you, is the interactions between the booking systems that you guys set up in accuBook and the booking system for mass vaccination sites. So we know it's causing a lot of administrative burden for you trying to deduplicate, where, for example, you've invited patients who have actually already got a booking that they've made through the National Booking Service, a mass vaccination site or elsewhere. Good news for you is that we're working with the National Booking Service team and NHSD to enable us to get access for you to query the mass vaccination site booking data so that you can deduplicate, and so that accuBook can handle the deduplication for you. So any invites that you do send out, or any patients that you do propose to invite, we've already got an invitation there. You won't have to go through this process of clarifying that they've got a booking elsewhere. So do stay tuned for future updates on that as well, like when we're able to put it into the product for you. We can't give you updates on timelines yet, but we should be able to soon in the emails that you'll also be subscribed to. So the accuBook weekly update email is probably the next time that you'll hear about that. We just wanted to say that we're really aware of it. We know how much of a burden it's causing for you, and we're really on top of it, and have been pushing NHS colleagues at the centre to get that available to you. So as we go into the rest of the webinar, I probably should have put this up a little bit further. This is not the place to come to learn how to use accuBook if you're a new accuBook user or you're a new organisation getting set up with accuBook. The place to do that is support.accurex.com. Head over there. There is a massive suite of guides about how to use the platform, how to set up delivery sites, for example, or invite patients for the first time. That's the place to go there. We'll talk a little bit about some of the features of accuBook here, like inviting for second doses. But this webinar will be available on YouTube afterwards. So if you're completely new, go here, go to support and the support library there if you're looking for a particular bit of help on the accuBook front. So it's a really fantastic resource. It's also live chat available if you're still stuck after consulting those resources. You can always come back and watch this webinar later. So. And finally, another great place for support is the Facebook group with other accuBook users and users of indeed of the various accuRex products. It's a fantastic place to go and share how you're using accuBook, learn from others, and hear about the latest news and updates. So hit the accuRex desktop community. We'll also share some of these slides afterwards, so you've got the links available as I'm displaying on these slides. And then the final thing from me on the updates overall is the vaccine clinics that we've been able to visit, to say thank you to those who have been able to visit virtually and physically. And then we're also open to other invitations. It's a great way for our product teams to learn about how the vaccine clinics are running, for anyone indeed on the accuRex side to learn about how vaccine clinics are running, and ultimately provide you with a better software to help you run those. So we can also help you get the most out of accuBook when you're there. Sorry, when we're there and talking to you. So that's something that we know people have appreciated when we've had those visits. So just drop a line to vaccine.support@accurex.com if you'd like to have us over. Thank you again to all of those who have shown us around, either holding up a phone as we navigate the clinic, or indeed having some members of the accuRex team on site. So now I'm going to hand over to Lucy Marples, our clinical lead on accuBook and indeed accuTrack, who's going to take us through the the accuBook update for this webinar.
Thank you so much, Matt. I will share my screen as soon as you stop sharing yours. There we go. Can you see that okay? Great. So as Matt said, I'm Dr. Lucy Marples. I'm the clinical lead for accuBook. And what I'm going to do today is walk you through second dose bookings, and then afterwards have a Q&A. So before I do that, I just wanted to touch on recent NHS England guidance. Last week, they reiterated the message that second dose bookings should be scheduled for the 12th week after the first vaccine, specifically 77 to 84 days post first vaccine. We've heard from a lot of you that adherence to such a strict and exact time frame would be just not workable in practice. It will preclude many successful second dose bookings. Therefore, we have not changed accuBook. Patients can book from either 21 or 28 days after their first dose, vaccine dependent, for any available points in the next 3 weeks after the invite sent, specific to their vaccine type. So we've fed our discussions with you back to NHS England, who've acknowledged this, and we'll be continuing to monitor how you get on with second bookings, and making sure we're looped into any forthcoming NHSE changes or guidance. So the key message here is that we're not going to implement a change that would constrain you in any way. I'm keen to stay on topic here and just talk about the practicalities of second bookings and not to get into detailed discussions about timeframes. But rest assured, we have been doing research. We've got more research with users lined up this week. And we'd also love to hear your thoughts and feedback. So there's a link at the bottom here, which you can go to let us know what you think about the second dose bookings timing. So moving on to second doses, a few things just to be aware of before we start. Firstly, we have taken the decision back when the first doses and second doses were split to be 12 weeks apart. We took the decision to separate the booking processes, separate the invite processes. And that was in order to avoid difficulties with future uncertainties such as unknown delivery schedules or venue changes, booking a second dose so far in advance. NHSD and NHSC have confirmed to us that it's not mandatory to book patients into their first and second vaccines at the same time. Their main concern is simply avoiding patients falling through the cracks, which accuBook is very much designed to prevent. The second thing is we are making it easier for patients to book in for their second vaccines. So at the moment, it does require an extra step. So with booking first vaccines, you you upload patients to the system and invite them at the same time. For second bookings, those bits are split. So you first add the patients to accuBook if they're not there already, and then you invite them. We are looking on making the whole process easier. So for example, we're looking at allowing you to send an invite to a patient much sooner after their first invite. The third thing I want to point out today and demonstrate is our new user override feature, which is when you are booking patients in manually for their second doses. This allows you to see additional clinic availability that the patients wouldn't be able to see outside of the timeframe and hidden clinics. So without further ado, I will move on to my demo. I've got lots of different practices set up here, but let's go for this one at the moment. And on the vaccine setting page, a few things to point out. I'm just going to hide all the past clinics. There we go. So you can see I've got a clinic that I'm in the process of setting up here. The first thing to point out is the changes to capacity. So with waning uptake in younger cohorts, we've heard from many of you that the current ability to text patients and invite them is not enough. Therefore, we've increased the number of patients you can text to be 3 times the capacity of the clinic. And just to be clear, that constraint will last for 24 hours, after which you can invite more patients to that clinic if you're not getting enough uptake. We will be adding, as Matt has said, we will be making sure that we are ready to go with Moderna as soon as it hits the ground. So you'll be able to add that here. And you can also choose what type of clinic you can invite patients to. So it can be a first dose only clinic, a second dose only clinic, or a mix of both clinic. Okay. So moving back to actually showing you how to invite the patients. So a few of you have noticed this week that something we've changed is we've removed the ability to show all patients here with a filter here. And some of you got in touch asking why you've done that and if it's on purpose, if it's going to be changed. The reason we've removed this option is that some people who had many patients in their all patients page were finding it incredibly slow to upload the system. So we've removed the show all, but rest assured you can still easily search for a patient by their name, but with none of the tick boxes selected. So that will have exactly the same effect as if you'd ticked show all and had then searched for them. Okay, so moving on to inviting patients. So first of all, you have to, so just to be very clear again, some of your patients awaiting second bookings are already in accuBook system. So those people you do not need to upload and invite. If you've got new patients to upload, you do so by selecting the relevant CSV file that you've already prepared. And now there are 2 things going on as this is loading. So the first thing is that accuBook is checking against PDFs. So we're making sure that the correct patient information is there. And you will get a warning if if we don't think what's in your CSV matches what's on PDF, which did happen to a lot of users initially. The second thing that's happening at the moment is accuBook's checking against NIMS, which is the National Database of Immunisations. We're able to see any patients who have already been vaccinated, even if it's elsewhere, and see what dose they've had first, second dose. We cannot see at the moment, we cannot see if a patient has been booked elsewhere. We can only see if they've been invited elsewhere. So that's why this is taking a little while to upload, because it's doing that essential checking. In the interest of time, I think I'm just going to skip back, pretend that you've uploaded them, and skip back to the all patients page where they would be. So again, just to, oh no, great, here we go. So here, and because it's checked against NIMS, you can see the different states the patients have fallen into. So these patients have not yet been invited for even a first dose. So when you go through the flow, you'll imminently text them, send them the invite for the first dose, and they'll go into the awaiting response for first. This is a patient who's been manually looked there first, and these are the patients who will be awaiting their second invite. So note the difference. When you go through the flow, you'll be texting these now, and they'll be invited. Whereas for the second patients, all you're doing is uploading them to the system. You have not yet invited them. So I'll continue here. This is composing the message to the first invite, sending it, and then I'm back to my all patients page. Great. So I've got all my patients in the system now that I want, and now we can get on with the actual inviting. So we suggest that you invite patients in their 9th week post first booking, because they'll be able to see, sorry about that, give me a second, because they'll be able to see any available clinic appointments for their valid clinic 3 weeks in advance. So if you invite them in their 9th week, there should be a sensible number of clinics and patients suitable. I'm just going to show you 10 weeks for the moment so you can see all different patients in their different states. So here's a bunch of patients who are 10 weeks post first vaccine. I'd like to invite them all. I can either invite them individually like so, or I can select all of them and send them a bulk invite in one go. There we go. So this is the patients. There's a reminder who I'm inviting. I can continue, and there we go. I'm sending my second invite. Back to the all patients page. Something else I'd just like to demonstrate, the user override. So for patients who I'd like to manually book to their second appointment. Oh, why is this not working? Give me just a moment. Going to flip to a different practice. There we go. So here's a patient who needs to be manually booked into their second appointment. And this is where our new user override flow comes into its own. So I can book them. And I can see two things. I can either book them in using the clinic appointments that they can see. So these are all the available relevant appointments in the next 21 days. Or if I select this, I can see appointments outside of that time frame. So any published appointments outside of that time frame, including hidden clinics. I don't know if we've got any set up here, but they'd be flagged as hidden clinic. And those are ones that only users can choose to book into. So that's everything I'd like to show you today. I'll hand back to Maya, but just to summarize, we've gone through the fact that we aren't constraining you to only booking 77 to 84 days post-vaccine. The fact that first and second bookings are done separately, they're not done in one go. The fact there's an additional step to inviting second patients, that you need to upload them and then invite them separately. We've looked at how to upload, invite patients in bulk for their second bookings, and we've looked at this user override flow. So I'll pass back to Maya, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Lucy. Do you mind if I take over?
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks. Perfect. There we go. Can you see that? Perfect, thanks. So hi everyone, I'm Maya. I'm one of the 2 product managers on accuTrack, which is our point of care recording product, which is upcoming. We're in the assurance process with NHS Digital at the moment. I'm going to show you an end-to-end demo of accuTrack, of what we've built. Just to highlight, it is integrated with accuBook. So that will be the way that you use it. So we'll start from the booked clinics page, which many of you will be familiar with. So we'll go into this clinic here, and we're going to record a vaccination for this patient. So we'll mark them as arrived, add record. And on the right-hand side here, you can see that we have the patient's relevant vaccination history. So we pull this from the National Immunisation Management Service that Lucy mentioned, which is also pulled in the booking stage. So this patient has had first dose Pfizer in January and hasn't had any recent flu immunisations recorded, and you get a time that it was last updated there. So we'll say this patient is due first dose. Nope, they've had their first dose, so second dose. And you see that there's a little alert. We'll say no to this question. Could say the patient's being vaccinated in a care home, which I know is important as it's charged differently, but for this example, we'll say no. Choose an ethnicity here. And then we have these interactable clinical screening questions, which you only need to tick if they apply to the patient. We'll say the patient's clinically suitable, consent has been provided. And then here we have a staff list, which is pulled from a centrally managed staff table where you can upload your staff, their registration codes and roles, and they pull through to the form. So I'm going to select Maya, so my name, and then for every form I fill out after this on my browser window, it will pre-select Maya for the options that I've chosen it for, so that I don't have to enter it again. I know on Pinnacle that works as sole practitioner or staged process, but we only have to do it once for the first form. So we've got time of vaccination here, so I'll just update that to be really precise. These are preset, but the user can override as with most of the options on the form. And we'll choose the webinar batch here. We've got a nice little optional nickname for batches to help remind you which one to select. Injection site. And then, as mentioned, I'll put my name for this one, and the next form that I fill out, that will be pre-filled with my name there, or whatever names I decide for filling in those roles. So we'll submit the record. So that's record submitted for this patient. And then you'll see here, if we go back in, my name is pre-filled there. So just to highlight here, so we have a way for you to be able to see which records are submitted, which records are partially complete. We have vaccine type badges, and next week we're adding dose sequence badges. So it will say first dose or second dose, whatever they're booked for in accuBook, and then it will change based on what they receive if that's overridden by the user. So I'm going to stop my demo and share the slides again and talk a little bit about the reporting designs that we have. Cool. Ooh, sorry. Perfect. Can you see that? Cool. Cool. So we know one of the things that's come up in our user research sessions has been that you want to be able to download details about what's happened during the vaccination clinic. So details about the records that have been submitted, DNAs, and which type of vaccine the users received and which batch it's from, etc. In order to report back and also to improve processes in the clinic and account for supply you've received. So we'll have this export submitted records button at the top right here, which will let you download everything you need to see into a CSV. And then we are also working at the moment on these in-product dashboards, which are to do with how many vaccinations you've administered per batch, so that it would make it a little bit easier for people to count remaining doses, so that there's no wastage, and that all the appointments are filled. I'm now going to hand over to Donny, who's the other accuTrack product manager, to talk a bit about how the data flows from accuTrack onwards.
Thanks very much, Maya. Yes, just been checking in on the questions there and got a lot of good ones. One thing I wanted to take off just as we go forward is, yes, we are designing accuTrack to be an alternative to Pinnacle. We're currently going through the assurance process with NHSD so that you'll be able to use accuTrack solely and without Pinnacle. All of the information that we collect in accuTrack will be transmitted to the appropriate places, and actually what I'm going to start off talking about right here. So as Maya and Lucy mentioned, accuTrack is integrated with accuBook, which means that when you're running your clinics, you'll be able to access the recording form just right there. We pull from NIMS both in accuTrack and in accuBook, so you'll always know what the patient's previous vaccination history is. And so we've talked about how you record the information, but I want to spend a little bit of time about explaining where that information goes once you have recorded it. So similar to Pinnacle, you'll use that as your one-stop shop to sort of ship off vaccination record information. Overnight, accuTrack will send a sample file to NHS Digital's data processing service called DPS, which will then update it through mesh to the local GP practices, the National Immunization Management Service, and also the MHRA, which is the Ministry of Health and Resources. I definitely don't have that acronym right, but somebody will save me, I'm sure.
Medicines and Health Regulatory Authority. I think
Thanks so much, Matt.
Correct term there, Donny. We'll give you a pass on that one.
Yes. That information, they're largely concerned with the adverse reaction samples that we send at the same time as both the extended attribute file and the vaccination record. Something that NHS is working on right now is creating an instantaneous API with BSA so that those payments are measured and sort of kept up to date live, which we won't be going live with into our controlled go live, our first test with practices. But once the BSA API is ready for us to go, we'll make sure that that's seamlessly integrated, and so you don't have to worry about any payments. Can I have the next slide, please? So we've talked a lot about this assurance process right now, and I thought we'd just spend a little bit more time diving into why it's taking us a little bit longer than we had hoped to get accuTrack into the hands of your clinics. So as accuTrack is going to be a point of care solution, it's going through quite a few details of clinical safety, not just from clinicians, but also from the data people at the NHSD. But once we do get our final sign off, accuTrack is going to be completely certified, and you'll be free to use it as a direct alternative to Pinnacle. So as I mentioned before, it's currently being looked at by clinicians who work at the GPIT Futures clinical group. The data view is being looked at by the central vaccinations team and ensuring that the flow is going to work perfectly from day one. And as I mentioned, we're working on building out that BSA integration so that payments happen a lot more easily than I think they've been happening in the past couple of weeks. Can I have the next slide, please? Where we're at now in this assurance process is quite further along than last time we spoke, which we're happy to report. We've completed our data review. So that's just the actual sample and the way that those files are sent onto NIMS and onto the local GP practices. That stage has been complete, and we're currently in the witness testing phase, which is a combination of data assurance as well as them watching live. They might have.
You're back, Donny. Sorry, you just had a connection issue.
Apologies about that. Is it better now? Cool. I'll just go back to witness testing, which is essentially the stage where we go through the data sample in tandem with a user experience overview, similar to the demo that Maya just gave us. And then they track to see that data updates to the appropriate places as designed. Once we meet that level, we'll move into the final production stage, which is where we move into the production environment, but with synthetic patient data. And we see that data flow from start to finish, including writing back to GP records, to NIMS, to MHRA, and so forth. Once we hit all those, we'll start off our live testing in a controlled group of practices that we've already reached out to. If you hit the next slide, please. So we have already got a list of practices that we'll be rolling out to just for our testing phase, or the controlled go live. Some of the users might know this as the first of type. However, if you are very keen and interested in being one of the first people to use accuTrack, don't hesitate to join our waiting list, where you'll get all the updates about where we are in the assurance process, when we expect to be live in practices, and any cool updates that we add to the product before we get it into your hands. And I think that's it from me. I think I'm heading to you, Matt, for some Q&A.
Brilliant. So thanks very much to Donnie, to Maya, and to Lucy for taking us through those updates on accuBook and accuTrack. Really exciting developments on both fronts, and I hope the information contained there has been helpful. So now we're going to move on to the Q&A section. We've already had quite a few come in, so you can, if you're new to Zoom webinars, there's a little button which has two speech bubbles above it. There's Q&A. I'm sure you've already found it, but that's where you can ask your questions of us. And colleagues are already answering some of them on text in the chat, if they're things that they can cover off quickly, and also flagging things for us to answer live for you. So I'm going to run through some of the questions that have been coming in to date, but please do continue to share. I think we've got about up to 20 minutes for questions, and that'll be should be more than enough to cover everything. So the first question I think I'm going to pass over to Lucy, which is a question about whether we have any plans for accuBook to be used for essentially anything other than COVID-19 vaccines at the moment, specifically flu vaccines was what this one came in about. So Lucy, do you have anything there?
Yeah, that's a big fat yes. We've already started looking into this for flu vaccines, but also for any other long-term recall. We've started doing a little bit of research into this, and we'll be making plans later in the year.
Fantastic, that's super helpful. And actually another one, there's a few questions around it. Sorry, another one for you, Lucy, but a few questions around the exceptions to the vaccine type. So one colleague, I think, is essentially having problems that they want to make a few exceptions to the second or first dose bookings of a clinic. And I wonder if that's something that you would be able to answer for us from a clinical point of view. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'm not totally sure. I can see the question. I'm not 100% sure what the issue is. If the issue is wanting to book patients, change the dose they're going to have for the first booking as a one-off. So let's say you've got a Pfizer vaccine, but actually on the day someone might need an AstraZeneca. They don't need to have been booked in as an AstraZeneca patient. NIMS will correctly identify they've had AstraZeneca, and then for their second dose, they'll be invited to AstraZeneca clinics. If it's that you want to specifically book them in as an AstraZeneca patient on a bit of a one-off and you don't really have a clinic set up, probably the best workaround for that would be to set up a hidden clinic. So that's one that patients can't see or book into, but users can book into, and then to manually book them in yourself to that very specific tiny kind of fake clinic. If the issue is that they've had one dose for the first booking and you want to give them a different dose for the second booking, that's a slightly more tricky issue. That is not something our system currently supports, and we are aware there are some cases when it may need to happen. So for example, if someone's had an adverse reaction to Pfizer and now they need AstraZeneca for their second. That said, it's a pretty rare scenario so far. We haven't really heard, we've only had a couple of questions about it coming through on support, and it's not really something we'd like to make an easy flow at the moment, because the Green Book advice, NHS England advice, is that changing the dose should be very much a last resort. So it's not really something that should just be done because it's a bit easier. It's something that should be done when there is no other option and they need a vaccine. So it's not something we support at the moment, but if this keeps coming up, if it's proving a problem, we can definitely take that on board and relook. So just let us know, keep feeding back.
That's great, thank you so much for that, Lucy. So another one for you. I think we're going to just handle some on the kind of like the appointment management side first. A question that came in about why it's not why it's currently not possible to see the type of vaccinations when we are booking patients in for the first dose for manual booking. I believe this is the case. Correct me if I'm wrong to the questioner who asked this, but I think that was where the question was about in the manual booking zone.
That's really good feedback. Thank you for flagging that up. It's definitely something that we can see as a benefit, so we will look into that.
Nice. Okay, and then a couple of more further questions about capacity limits. So you talked through a little bit about how that's been changed. It might be worth reiterating it, Lucy. But at the moment, there's essentially, the change in the uptake rates in the new priority groups and where the rate of response is much lower. Is this something that we're continuing to review? And what kind of factors go into that capacity limit?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's something that we're very, very aware of, and we're looking at our numbers on a day-by-day basis. We've got two key priorities that we're trying to balance between. The first one is making it easy for users to invite patients, and the second one is a good experience for the patients. So we don't want it to be the case that you invite everybody you ever need to invite to a tiny number of clinics, and then most patients see there are no clinics to book into. So it's trying to balance those two things. We are aware that it's often difficult, and there's often discrepancy between different patient populations in different areas. So we're trying to set the capacity limits to a bit of a one-size-fits-all that will maximise things for most people. We are listening, as I said, on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis, and that's why this week we've changed the capacity limit to be 3 times the updose, the invite amount, whereas last week it was 2 times the amount. So, and we're going to just keep reviewing week by week, seeing how many patients, seeing how many of you struggle, see how much difficulty there is with capacity, and seeing how many patients are actually hitting that no appointments available message. And we're just going to have to keep changing it week by week.
Great, thanks very much, Lisa. Yeah, so that feedback is super helpful, as with the other questions as well. So I think the final one on the appointment management side was about patients going back to the same site. And so questioner asks, if we upload the whole list from our clinical system, would accuBook be able to pick these out and not invite, essentially not invite them for a different site?
Yes, okay, so we've heard from the majority of practices that they want the flexibility on the patient site due to uptake and not wanting to waste vaccine. So we've kept this open versus restricting the same site for both doses at the moment. And we also don't get the location from NIMS about where they've been booked into, only the, or had their vaccine, only the fact they've had it.
Really helpful, really clear, Lucy. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions on the accuTrack side of things that have been coming in for Maya and Donnie to collect. So the first one is about essentially the accuTrack being an alternative to Pinnacle. What are the real benefits for networks, particularly large networks switching to accuTrack?
Yep, I can take that. Because accuTrack is integrated with accuBit, it means you can use your logins for AccuRx in order to access it, so you wouldn't have to set up all your staff there. The second thing is that because it's integrated with accuBook, you get the patient information pulled through from the booking side, so you won't need to enter it when the patient sits down in the vaccination room as you do on Pinnacle. Another thing is that I know that accuTrack has brilliant reporting features, which I just demoed some of, which mean you can download CSVs of all of the outcomes from your clinics, and also monitor dose counts and batch stock in the product, and also identify who's arrived, who's not arrived, whose records are being completed currently. I think they're probably the main points, as well as, of course, it being really reliable. I know Pinnacle's had some problems with outages and records not saving in the past, and we can guarantee that accuTrack will be a very reliable, scalable product.
Fantastic. And just related to that, so just related to that point about reporting there, think this may be one for Donny, but a questioner asked, how does accuTrack link with payments? So I think it might be worth bringing up the slide again. Maya, if you can navigate back to that for Donny's answer. But yeah, would you be able to talk to that, Donny?
Of course, yeah. So this is something that is still ongoing from NHSD, but there is appetite on the NHSD side to move from the current payment process to an API, which is more of an instant process. It will mean that accuTrack will have a direct integration with BSA, which will monitor how many vaccine recordings are booked per ODS code. Now, obviously, with some of the changes to ODS codes since the vaccine program started in December, there's some additional complexity around like how we map which patient gets paid where, which is just the reason for that ongoing delay. But that is something that once they resolve, we'll be able to integrate specifically with every single vaccine recording that you record in accuTrack. So that will happen instantly. In the interim, particularly for the clinics that will partner with us as we go into that pilot practices, as well as anyone who wants to use this from the start of a net new month, we'll be able to record all vaccinations in a separate spreadsheet locally, and then make sure that that gets transmitted to BSA for payments.
Brilliant. I think the reporting features that we were talking about as well will be able to give practices and PCNs more information than they had the first couple of times round with the payments. We know reconciling some of the entries on Pinnacle and what you see in the BSA's manage your service portal, and were particularly hard the first few times around. And this work that Donny has been referring to is designed to mitigate the risk of that happening again. So that experience should hopefully be much smoother, and we'll make sure that it is certainly, and we'll do everything we can to make sure that is as smooth as possible for you. So handles payments in a very similar way, but hopefully overall it will be better for you. So the next question on accuTrack was about recording a walk-in patient. So we talked a bit about the integration with accuBook, but what about those cases where those patients don't have an appointment on accuBook and they walk up to the clinic and you'd like to make sure that they still receive their vaccine and their vaccine is still recorded? Maya, would you be able to answer this one?
Yeah, of course. So great question. So yeah, there will be a functionality for you to be able to record a vaccination for a walk-in patient. I'll just explain a bit about how it works. So the patient would arrive and you would perform a PDS, patient demographics match, with patient name, NHS number, or postcode, etc. And you'd be able to find that patient, identify them, and create a record directly from that. And then record a vaccination for them there. It will create an anytime slot in your accuBook clinic. So there'll be an archive of them having been part of that clinic as well. And then it will just flow in the same way. The data will flow in the same way to NIMS as the rest of the recorded data in that clinic. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it does. So another question for you, Maya, which was one about more maybe feedback on the user interface. So a question that came in was, once you've added a record, does it disappear out of the booked patient list? So our users don't have to keep scrolling through. How does that work, Maya?
Yeah, so this is something we've thought about as well, the booked list page not getting so clogged up with patients who have arrived and records that have been submitted. So we have some filters at the top of that page now where you'll be able to filter out patients who have arrived, patients with records submitted, etc. So if you just want to view the patients that are still to arrive who haven't had records submitted, then you'll be able to do that on the device that you're using.
Nice, thank you. So another question about the integrations with the other data flows, basically, Donny. So for you, with entries recorded in accuTrack, how long does the information take to reach the GP surgery? So back into the clinical systems there.
Sure, yeah. So this is actually AccuRx's first time integrating with the mesh framework. So we will be monitoring it once we go live, but as we understand it, we'll be sending the copy of the recording to NHSD, who will use Mesh to write that back to the GP practices. According to them, they say this can take from 1 to 3 days post once they actually receive it. We are going to have some metrics in place to make sure that that is true to form. And we'll also have a direct integration down the line with accuBook as well, and find out a way to write that information into your accuBook list of patients more quickly. In the future, there is going to be probably a move to using the FHIR messages to write information back to the GP record, but that's not something that looks to be in scope before probably the end of this vaccination push by NHS's side.
So that would mean, Donny, that we don't rely on NHSD as a middle person in handing it back to the clinical IT records.
Yeah, thanks for that, Matt. It would mean that we would send a copy to NHSD and DPS and MHRA, but we would also send a copy directly to all the local practices without having to go through the DPS middleman.
Great stuff. Okay, so the question that came in here, which is about the national the NIVS service, which I believe is the service that is used to record vaccinations, particularly for staff members in the health and care system. So I think that's something that we're going to have to take away and just clarify that, as well as the NIMS update that the data processing service from NHS Digital will provide for you on the accuRack side, we'll just make sure that that's also writing across to NIVS. Or how that's supposed to be handled. So that's for members of the workforce who are invited to vaccinate through the NIVS service. So we'll take that away. So thank you for that question about whether accuTrack feeds the NIVS service as well. So we will clarify that. So I don't know if that's rolled up with NIMS, which is what's being used for the whole population now. As well as NIVS. I think that's something that we just need to clarify for you. So yeah, if the questioner would like to get back in touch and share any further thoughts on that, we'd be really interested on that, but I'm pretty confident it will be covered by NHSD. A question again on accuTrack is about when it's likely to be live, please, and what kind of timelines we can share. So Donny, I think that one's over to you. You shared in your presentation what this is dependent on, and so it's not just something we can share with people. It's also dependent on other colleagues working very hard across the system.
Mm-hmm. As Matt said, and obviously as we all know, the central vaccinations team is severely spread quite thin right now. And so I think us and a couple other suppliers are all vying for attention by the team that sort of helps us work through the remaining parts of the assurance process. But according to the timelines that they've given us, the next stage that there are 2 stages that we're going through currently, and they shouldn't be taking too long. We expect to be out within the next little bit. I'm hesitant to say an actual date, but only as it's so dependent on what the assurance team, how they prioritize us and how they move us through the stages. But if you do join our waiting list, you'll be the first to know when we do know anything about going live.
Great, thank you. And just another question about essentially related to availability is how much will accuTrack cost, or will there be an extra cost here? I'm very happy to take that one, and then you can follow up if you'd like to, Donny. So it will be available alongside accuBook in a similar way. The commercial agreements are just being finalized, but it'll be available through a similar national framework in the same way that accuBook was. We were invited to supply to that from NHS Digital, so that's still being finalised, but essentially it's something that PCNs will be able to access. There is also scope in future, hopefully, maybe for a community pharmacy availability too, to be able to set up on accuTrack, because we know that they play an important and increasingly important role in the national vaccine program as well. So I think that's essentially the key bits there. Donny, was there anything to add from your side?
Nope, nothing on my side.
Cool. We'll share, like Donny says, we'll share more information about that as and when we can, and as and when we get it on the waiting list, and of course on the update emails that you've been getting as well. So a question here about that relates to the QR codes that have been used to bridge that gap at the moment between accuBook as an appointments management system and Pinnacle as a point of care solution. So I'm just going to read it in full for you guys. So can QR codes be used to book patients into clinics and search for them in the clinic list? We need a quick way to find patients once they're booked in, so the vaccinator gets the right patient quickly and easily.
Yeah, I can take that one. So I visited, I think 5 or 6 vaccination clinics now, and I've seen barcodes and QR codes used at quite a few of them. So totally understand. For others who haven't heard about this yet, they're being used to store patient information, and then to automatically, when they're scanned, input that patient information into the record on Pinnacle. As I mentioned, because the data is pulled through from accuBook, you'll just need to search for the patient with a booking by name in the search function, or you can scroll down the page and scan for them, and then just click add record. So it shouldn't be as complicated a step to identify the patient. If you wanted to continue using printing out and using QR codes in order to search for the patient name in the list, you could do that if you wanted to, but we hope that we've made it much easier by pulling that patient information through from accuBook and therefore minimizing data entry there with patient details. Hope that's clear.
Great, that's really clear. So thanks so much. I just wanted to say as well, we had a couple of webinars back, we had Dr. Michael Smith on, who is the kind of the genius behind that little QR code solution that has helped to bridge that. So we really appreciative of him and all the other users who kind of share great ways of using our products and embedding them in their workflows. If anyone else would like to come on in future as well, so it's an open invitation to colleagues across the system who use accuRx and accuBook to tell us how they use it in their practice. Like, please reach out to us. We'd like to get back to having a mix of not just accufolk on the call, but also our users too. So do send those in if you'd like to share. So I think I'm just getting through the list of questions here. So apologies while I fill time. I think we've addressed most of them. There's a question about non-NHS numbers. So whether it's possible to still record data on accuTrack. So really important. We know that there's a commitment from the Central Vaccine Programme that no patient should be turned away if they don't have an NHS number. It's slightly different to the beginning, where NHS number was certainly we were informed that was a requirement of the programme, but that's certainly changed, which is great for making sure that everyone in the community is being vaccinated. So at the moment, we're just clarifying exactly, working very closely with NHS Digital in England on exactly how to support patients with NHS numbers. It's likely to be some kind of a local solution, because at the moment it's the NHS number is what we use to identify patients in that upload to the central NIMS service. But we're working very hard on clarifying exactly that on the point of care side for you. Guys on the accuTrack team, if there's anything to add there, please do come in now. Looks like that's covered it. We will keep you posted on that question, because that was something we had raised as something we need to know exactly how to handle for you. So questions around accuTrack vaccination data and how it goes back to the patient record. And I think this will be the final one. So essentially, will the information get coded to the record when it goes back to the GP record? I think that was the question there. Donny, do you want to confirm that again?
Yep, I can confirm that. So because of mesh, we'll be writing back to the record just as Pinnacle does. So however it's received by Pinnacle currently will be the same way. It won't come in an accuRx like email message. It'll get directly into either EMIS or TPP, or I think there's a third one. but whichever vision, yes, whichever clinical system you operate from.
Yeah, so you'll be covered there. So actually, I think just to correct that, I might be on the vision side. There may be, I'd be interested in practices who do currently use vision if they're getting the right back to their record currently. So in the same way that Pinnacle passes data across there, I'm not sure that that is in place at the moment. So I've just seen one report of that. So I'm just trying to understand exactly how those practices are going to be in the flow there. So if anyone on the call does have information about that, just flag it up in the Q&A and I can pick it up with you. That'd be great. So final question, I think, because we're coming up on time, and so I'd like to keep us to time. It's Lucy. When it's going back to the second invitations, the second dose invitations, will it only show patients who booked their first vaccination through us for the first invite? How does that work?
Thanks, that's a good question to end on. So no, you can book any of your patients, even if they've had their first invite or vaccine done elsewhere. If they've had their first invite under you, they'll already be in accuBook. If they've had their first invite elsewhere, you'll need to add them to accuBook, but you'll be able to see that they've had their first vaccine elsewhere and they'll be automatically invited to their second. And that's why the NIMS integration is so useful.
Great, thank you so much. So thank you so much to my fellow panelists here from AccuRx. Most importantly, thank you all for your attendance and your participation in this webinar and the questions that you've been asking us as you've been going through. So Maya, if you just move the slides on one more time, that would be fantastic. So just to reiterate some of the messages from earlier, you can go to support.accurx.com to find out different information and amazing support articles about how to use the products. You will be able to watch this webinar and many others back, and some user sessions that we've run on accuBook and accuTrack on our YouTube channel, which is available at this bit.ly link, bit.ly/AccuRx channel. And those are the areas that you can go to hear about us in the meantime between these webinars, as well as the email updates and Facebook group. There's plenty of ways to stay connected, and we'll keep you up to date across all those channels. But just for us, the final thing to do is to say thank you so much. Stay safe. Thank you for all that you're doing on your amazing vaccine programs, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks very much.